Good evening, everyone. We want to welcome you to join us for the virtual candidate forum for the upcoming 2022 primary elections. Tonight, we will hear from candidates running for the Senate from District 2 and from District 13. I am Anitra Hamilton, the current president of the Morgantown-Kingwood branch of the NAACP. Tonight's event is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Morgantown-Monongalia County, as well as the Morgantown-Kingwood branch of the NAACP and the Community Coalition for Social Justice. We also want to remind everyone to please register to vote. Voting is the most popular and the most powerful way for your voice to be heard. The deadline to vote is April 19th, 2022, and election day is May 10th, 2022. Early voting starts on April 27th through May 7th, 2022. There are 4 locations that you can vote at within Monongalia County, and you can vote at any of these 4 locations. They are Mason-Dixon Park at 79 Buckeye Road, that's in Core, at the VFW Post 9916, that's located at 340 Holland Avenue in Westover, at the Mountaineer Mall at 5000 Greenback Road in Morgantown, and the old Earth Dodge dealership at 2000 Mid-Atlantic Drive, Morgantown. The process in order to qualify for absentee ballots has changed from the way that it was during COVID. So in order to qualify for absentee ballots, you must apply at govotewestvirginia.com. Ballots can be requested until May 4th. To return your ballot, they must be postmarked by May 10th, election day, or you can hand deliver them to the county clerk no later than May 9th. Just to give some important contact information, the Mon County Clerk can be reached at 304-291-7230. The county courthouse is located at 243 High Street, and their website is monongaliacountyclerk.com. You can also reach the West Virginia Secretary of State, and their website is listed, as well as their phone number, which is 304-558-6000. So with the 2021 redistricting, tonight we're going to hear from those running for Senate in 2 of the districts, and that is District 2 and District 13, which is Wetzel and Monongalia counties. Each district will elect 1 senator. The candidates we will be hearing from tonight from District 2 will be Charles Clements, which is Republican, Eric Hayhurst, which is Democrat, District 13, Carly Braun, which is Republican, Barbara Evans Fleischauer, Democrat, Rick Jacobs, Democrat, and Mike Oliverio, Republican. The format for tonight's event will be as following. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. And in your introduction, we're asking that you tell us why you're running for Senate and also what you hope to accomplish. As you approach the end of your time, you'll begin to see on the screen a green 30-second warning, as well as a yellow 15-minute second warning, followed by a red in your thought warning, followed by a series of questions, which will last. Each candidate will also get 2 minutes to answer each question. And with the questions, we will rotate which candidate will go first. And the series of warnings will apply with the questions as well. And we will end out the forum with closing statements from each candidate, and you will each get 2 minutes as well. So we will begin our introductions with District 2 with Charles Clements, Republican. We welcome you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I assume you're hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to go back and talk about myself a little bit, but mainly I want to talk about West Virginia. And I go back and look at 2015, when the Republicans took over control of the legislature. We were looking at a $400 million deficit. And now we are looking at a possible $1 billion surplus. Now, how was that done? It was done through fiscal responsibility, and we are trying to make our state a more attractive state for business and industry to come here. Because if we prevent jobs, we're doing a lot. It takes care of a lot of our problems. I was excited when the Hyperloop announced that they were going to build in West Virginia, not necessarily at the project, but just the fact that they looked at West Virginia. Before, we never got a glance. It was always, we were passed over. And now we're beginning to have people to take a look at us and see what we're trying to do. Our roads are in better shape now than they've been in a long time, even though spring does have its challenging moments with potholes and things. And we look forward to a lot more infrastructure improvements there. Our public employees have received 3 raises over the past 6 years, and we're paying our state police the salaries that they deserve. Now, why am I running for office? I want to continue this move forward in West Virginia. I want us to go forward. I want us to continue to improve, to be a state where people come to. I want us to be a state where people want to be.
Thank you, Mr. Clements, for your introduction. Next, we will have from District 2, Eric Hayhurst. We welcome you, Democrat.
Thank you, Anitra. I want to also thank the League of Women Voters and the Morgantown-Kingwood NAACP chapter and the Community Coalition for Social Justice for hosting this tonight. It's important. I think that voters get an opportunity to hear from those who have put their name forward on the ballot, and I'm looking forward to tonight and hearing not only what I have to say, but what the other candidates have to say as well. So just as an introduction by way of background, I'm a native of Wetzel County, grew up in a little town called Folsom. I grew up in a blue collar working class family. My dad was a well driller. My mom still works at Walmart to this day. So I went to WVU. I'm a 2-time graduate of WVU. For the most last 10 years, I've lived in or around Morgantown. But during the day, I'm a lawyer who represents individuals and small businesses. And I represent a lot of folks from the 2nd district and the rural areas, including in the urban areas. And the 2nd district has is a pretty large district encompassing all the way from Cheat Lake over to the Ohio River and up to Moundsville and down to Tyler and Doddridge County and even into Marion County. So there's a lot of area to cover and a lot of different folks who come from those areas, and I'm looking to represent them. As far as what I want to accomplish, it's pretty simple. I want to find real solutions to the real problems that are facing West Virginia. The legislature in the last several sessions has failed to do much to address the problems that are facing West Virginia, which include a crumbling infrastructure and an uncontrolled opioid epidemic that they just refuse to take on, and all the issues that come from that. West Virginia, I agree with Mr. Clements. It does need to be an attractive place, but the legislature has to do the work to do that, and they haven't done that.
Thank you, Eric, for your introduction. Next, we will have from District 2, Carly Braun, Republican. We welcome you.
He's District 13.
I'm sorry, District 13, Carly, we welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us all here, and a little bit of my background. I was a federal police officer with the FBI from 2015 to 2019. And then I took on the position of facial recognition. I was trained in fingerprints and facial recognition software as well. And then I took a position as an analyst, and I decided to leave my post at the FBI because of the vaccine mandates that were being pushed in 2020 with all the federal workers. So that's what began my running for office journey. And what I want to see for our state, I think all of us can agree, is we want to see our state be improved. We want to see families stay here and grow. And I think a few things that the legislator has been doing is getting high-speed internet for not only people in town in the Morgantown area, but also people that are not so close to the Morgantown area and even outside of our districts as well. And we all know that the roads is another big issue as well. And so I want to just help make our state better and get more people out of the poverty line, because our state continues to be one of or the poorest state in the nation.
Thank you, Carly, for your introduction. Next, we will have from District 13, Barbara Evans Fleischauer, Democrat. We welcome you. You're on mute. You're on mute, Barbara.
Well, that's kind of basic. I'll start out by thanking the League and also the NAACP and the Community Coalition for Social Justice. I really appreciate it. It is an opportunity when it's very hard to communicate with voters anymore with the weakness of newspapers and people distrusting the internet. So this is a great opportunity for us. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. My husband and I both live on the Evans family farm on Baker's Ridge. It's been in my family since the 1700s. And my grandfather, my mother's father, graduated from WVU in the early 1900s and moved to Pittsburgh and worked in the steel mills and became a teacher. And on my dad's side, neither of his parents ever graduated even from high school. And my dad was blessed with having a really good education like we do in this county, and eventually graduated from MIT and has 52 patents. It's pretty exciting. I graduated from the WVU College of Law, and I am married to Bob Basters, who's a professor. We have 2 grown children and 2 grandchildren. I want to keep working on some issues that I've worked very hard on, and that includes insulin and diabetes issues, making sure that people who have this life-threatening disease aren't being ripped off by the pharmaceutical companies. Another issue that I've worked on a lot is Mylan Pharmaceuticals, and I want to make sure that people who work there get the opportunities they deserved, including educational and work. That's tricky, and I worked very hard on that, and was able, with the assistance of Senator Manchin and Speaker Hanshot, to get cybersecurity designation. And I want to make West Virginia a place where our children want to stay, and that they're not looking for a reason to leave, and where you can raise a family. So I look forward to our questions. Thank you.
Thank you again, Barbara. Next, we will have from District 13, Mike Oliverio, Republican. We welcome you.
Thank you, Anitra and Sarah and Vicky from the League of Women Voters. I want to thank the NAACP and the Community Coalition for Social Justice for hosting the event tonight. I'm happy to be here and happy to participate. I'm a veteran, a small business owner, and a former legislator wanting to get back to the legislature and serve our community. I was excited to have an opportunity to work on many projects in the past to help make Monongalia County and Marion County a better place to live and work and raise a family. And I hope to have that opportunity to do that again. I hope to join my friend Charles Clements and others in the leadership of the legislature and be able to deliver for our communities. One of the reasons I'm running, and what I think is most important and most absent at this point, is a real focus on the services of state government. And that's everything from division of highways to making our public education system even better, and all the health and human resources and services that are offered, and using the resources of our state government, making sure that our public safety is at the highest level it can be, so that we can address the issues and serve the citizens. I feel like we get distracted with so many issues that we lose our focus on the primary role of government, And that's where I want to focus our time and our attention on delivering those services at the highest quality we can deliver them. And by doing that, we'll make West Virginia an attractive place where our citizens will want to stay and invest and grow small businesses, and where other citizens will want to come and join us in this special place that we call almost heaven.
Thank you, Mike, for your introduction. So next we'll move to the question portion of the forum. And again, we will rotate between each candidate as to who will answer the question first. Our first question. West Virginia traditionally has poor voter turnout, but in 2020, every voter in West Virginia could vote by absentee ballot, and we saw historic voter turnout without harm to election security. As a legislator, will you support universal absentee voting? If not, please tell us what specific legislation will you support to improve voter turnout in West Virginia? And we will start that with Mr. Charles Clements.
I guess I better unmute. I will support everything I can for universal voting. I don't like just at random mailing out ballots to addresses to people, because we don't know who gets the ballots. We don't know who fills them out. But I think people should have the right to get an absentee ballot at any time. But I think there needs to be some security on those ballots to make sure that they are not falling into the wrong hands, and make sure that the people that are intended to vote on those ballots get to vote on those with that ballot.
Thank you, Charles. Next, we will be followed by Eric.
Thank you, Anitra. I support making it easier to vote. We should make voting, we should make Election Day a national holiday. We should give individuals every opportunity to exercise their constitutional right to vote. We shouldn't make it harder for people to vote. One of the ways that we can do that is through absentee balloting or absentee voting. We did it during the pandemic. We didn't have any problems. The instances of voter fraud across the country were, in comparison, minuscule. It just doesn't happen very often. You can go check the research, you can check the documentation on that. It doesn't happen very often. So I'm certainly in favor of allowing people every opportunity to vote. That's what a democracy is about, getting people to the polls and choosing those who represent them in the legislature and the executive branch, and in states that elect their judges. We should get them out and allow them to vote. So yes, I would be in favor of absentee voting. Obviously, we need to make sure it's secure, and there are plenty of things that we can put in place to make sure that it is secure. And we've done that in the past, and we can continue doing that in the future.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Carly to respond.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. As for universal absentee voting, just mailing people absentee ballots like we saw in several states in 2020, I would, as a legislator, I would not be in favor of people just getting mailed absentee ballots, because it can cause a severe problem. If in just one sense is keeping up with the voter rolls, because that can be an issue as well. If somebody moves, then whoever lives in that home can have several ballots, and then they might be able to cast 3 or 4 ballots if they would like to, and they just send it in the mail, and there'd be hardly any way for anybody to know. So I think it could be very problematic. And in 2020, I think we saw that in areas it was problematic, and it just opens up a bigger problem of possible voter fraud. And we need to make it a little bit more accessible for people and encourage companies to allow employees to go vote on election day. And I think that's where a lot of the issues can lie, is if people are working, they may not be able to get off work. So I think that maybe the state can reach out to companies to allow people to maybe take an hour off work to go and cast their ballot. But I don't think absentee voting is a good idea across the board. I think absentee ballots should go back to how they were pre-pandemic, to where I believe if you are in the military or you physically can't go vote, then I think we should stay with those standards.
Thank you, Carly, for your answer. Next, we will have Barbara respond.
Thank you. Well, I have a different view than my colleague who's running for the 13th. I think that the most important thing is that everyone who is a citizen should be able to vote. That should be our priority. And it seems to me all these other issues that were not an issue in the 2020 race and were not an issue when we had municipal voting by mail in Mon County and have not been an issue in Oregon and 6 or 7 other states. Those are like side issues. What we should really be concerned about is this is a democracy. Are people able to vote without hindrance? I don't think it's the work issue because our polls are open 6:30 to 7:30, but we have a very poor turnout, and we had historic voter turnout. I don't understand why we wouldn't want to say, if there were things wrong with the last election, let's fix them, because that was really good that so many people voted. It was wonderful. I wasn't happy with all the results, but it was a good thing for our country and for our state that we had such massive turnout. And so I think that the priority should be that citizens should be able to vote. And I don't like purging. I think that's horrible that we're taking people off the rolls and they have to go through hoops to demonstrate that they're a citizen. Everybody's a citizen, just about. There are very few people in this country who are not citizens, and they should be able to vote. And I think that's what we're all about. I really enjoyed watching Ben Franklin last night on the Ken Burns history. We need to go back to our roots when we encourage people to vote.
Thank you for your response. And we will wrap up that question with a response from Mike.
Thank you, Anitra. I think we should have a absentee program where voters can request an absentee ballot. We have an elderly population, and there are some citizens that could create a real hardship for them to be able to get out and vote. So we ought to have a process where people can request an absentee ballot. So I support the current process, and it gives the clerks an opportunity to confirm the legitimacy of that person as a voter. But aside from that, the legislation that I passed years ago with then Secretary of State Joe Manchin that created the early voting law has given voters many days ahead of the election to be able to get out to vote. We allow a 13-hour period of time on election day to vote. So I think those citizens that will take the time to register to vote properly, if they're unable to get to the polls, they can use the absentee process. But if they're able to get to the polls with all the days associated with early voting, generally 2 Saturdays available, and then election day itself, I think we're giving people an opportunity to vote. And we're also giving our clerks an opportunity to conduct the elections in a fair manner. We don't want same-day voter registration where somebody can show up and vote on the day of the election without being registered. We want accountability. We want every vote to count, and we want every vote to be a legal vote. And that's what's important in a democracy. As to getting others to vote in the future, my legislation years ago made it possible for parents and grandparents to bring their children to the polls when they vote. And I think if a parent or grandparent will bring a 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old to the polls, that child will see, as they model the behavior of their parents or grandparents, they'll see those people they respect voting, and they'll be more likely to vote in the future.
Thank you for your response. Thank you all for responding great answers to question 1. We will now move on to question 2. Under the U.S. Constitution, every citizen is guaranteed the right to vote. But in West Virginia, felons can't vote until parole and probation are completed. Will you support legislation to restore voting rights earlier? Please explain. We will begin this questioning with Eric.
Thank you, Anitra. Going back to my prior answer, I believe in it is the citizen's constitutional right to vote, as the question encompasses it. So my position on this would be, I think I'm also a believer in the rehabilitation. Once a person has completed their sentence and has paid their debt to society for doing what it is they've done, they should be able to reenter society and have the opportunity to do the things that a normal citizen would be able to do, to be able to get their life back on track. The purpose of jail time, the purpose of incarcerating individuals is to rehabilitate them. Sometimes that's difficult to do, as we see with repeat offenders. But if they've served their time, if they've done what they needed to do, they should be able to re-enter society and do the things that they are constitutionally entitled to do, and that includes voting. Obviously, if they commit another crime or something that's different, but as long as they've paid their debt to society, I would be in favor of restoring their right to vote.
Thank you, Eric, for your answer. Next, we will have Carly. Please respond.
In regards to allowing felons to just vote as soon as they get out of jail, I think I would like to keep it currently as it is. If they are currently still on parole, then they should have to wait until that period is over in order to be eligible to cast their vote. And I say that because, like Eric just said, there are many repeat offenders, not all of them, but a lot are repeat offenders. And I know that we have countless people who are on parole and they commit another crime, or they commit another crime and then they have to go back into jail for whatever their sentence is. So I would be in favor of keeping or restricting their voting until they are completely off of parole, and then they will be eligible to vote at that time.
Thank you, Carly, for your answer. Next, we will have Barbara.
Thank you, Anitra. I agree with everything Eric said. I think it's a constitutional right to vote. I think that when people have served their time, they should be able to vote. It's the rights of citizens. And it's not just when they're on parole that they might be reincarcerated. About 30 to 40% of the people that go back are into jail haven't paid a fine or something like that, or they have minor violations. So we are talking about depriving people of the vote and putting them back in prison. It's like poverty sentences. So I really think that we need to look. We are paying a fortune to keep people in jail that don't belong there. We need to stay secure. We need to keep violent offenders there. And but I think that voting is so important. It's sacred. And this is artificial. Other states don't have this, and we should move into the modern world and say that when you've completed your sentence, you are restored as a citizen, and we want you to become a part of society. And that's part of what being a member of society is voting.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Mike.
I support the current law. I think that those that commit felonies should complete their parole and probation before they're entitled to vote again. But I really kind of get tired with this subject, to be honest. I would rather we spend our time talking about people voting who don't normally vote. How can we reach out to people of color who don't feel as enfranchised and use their vote? How can we reach out to them, provide services and programs to teach them about elections? I was in Marion County last night, and the public library there has put together an excellent voter guide. We ought to try to share that with people who don't ordinarily vote and try to encourage them. We ought to try to encourage young people in our community with programs in our high schools, and use our colleges, use our community and technical schools to reach out to people and encourage them to learn about the process we love called democracy, and encourage them to get involved. Let's not waste our time talking about people who have committed felonious acts. Let them finish their sentence and become back in good standing and give them an opportunity to vote. Let's focus our time and effort on all those people that aren't voting and ask ourselves why they aren't voting and what we can do to encourage them to become part of this process and make the process better.
Thank you for your answer. And lastly, we'll have Charles wrap up that question.
Thank you. I may part ways with some of my Republican colleagues on this issue because I have spent the last 6 years on the Committee on Oversights and Jails and Prisons in the state of West Virginia. And I will never forget one of the first times we went into one of those institutions. There was a warden there that had been there for years, told me, he said, 75% of the people in here are good people. They just made a mistake. And that always stuck with me as something important. And I have supported legislation to try to get people this right to vote, has given them an incentive to get out and to become a full part of society. Some people may be on parole or probation for a long time. So I do not have a problem with restoring their voting rights once they've served their sentence.
Thank you for your answer. We'll move on to question number 3. The West Virginia Human Rights Act prohibits discrimination in employment and in places of public accommodations based on race, religion, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, age, 40 or above, blindness, or disability. What is your position on adding language to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity? And for this question, we will start with Carly.
And Anitra, you're still on mute. Okay.
Sorry.
I would not, if I was sitting in the legislature, I would not be for adding language for discrimination law for gender identity, because we've seen how subjective that can be over just the past few years. And with pronoun usage and just how, like you said, fluidity can happen, then that can put employers who are just trying to hire people to do a job, then that can make employers liable if, say, a man who thinks he's a woman wants to get a job, but then they change their pronouns or their gender identity frequently, and we have seen this happen. So I think that would not be good for employers. That would not be good for the confused people who are saying that they have a fluid gender identity. And I don't think that would be good for our state or for our country, and it wouldn't be good for the economy of West Virginia. And what we need to do as citizens of West Virginia and potential legislators of West Virginia is we need to defend truth, especially on this topic. And that's what I would aim to do.
Thank you, Carly, for your answer. Next, we will have Barbara.
Thank you, Anitra. Well, I feel very strongly about this issue. And I suppose it's because of my background in the civil rights movement. My mother went to school with Coretta Scott King. My family was very involved in the National Organization for Women, starting it in various cities. And if you think about this state was born out of slavery and in opposition to treating people differently. Discrimination hurts. It doesn't matter what the reason is, it hurts. And it means you might not be able to find a place to live, and you might not be able to get a job because somebody has this prejudice against you. And it's very painful. And I think it's very wrong. And I have supported changing our law since 1995. That's when I first introduced legislation. And I am glad that Mike has voted in favor of that as well when he was in the Senate. I think that we are not going to move forward as a state. We are going to have people walking with their feet. We are going to be seen as backwards. And we are not going to bring in business unless we support that. We say that we are firmly against discrimination in West Virginia.
Thank you for your answer, Barbara. Next, we will have Mike.
Thank you. You know, being of Italian heritage, my family in its early years in this country faced discrimination. And I heard many stories about that growing up. And I have always made an effort to conduct myself as a legislator with a focus on fairness. I have voted to include sexual orientation into things like the hate crime statute, voted to protect those, both their sexual orientation and even those with the perceived sexual orientation when in matters of housing and employment. And so I would be open-minded to issues that arise in the coming years with a sense of fairness. But I also want to be fair to everybody involved. And when I look at what's going on today in women's sports, I don't think what's being done is fairness. So I think there's a balancing act that has to occur, and we send people to Charleston that we have trust and confidence in their judgment. We can't expect them to answer hundreds of hypothetical questions, but we need people that are of honor and integrity and can balance issues and try to make decisions that are fair to everyone.
Thank you for your answer, Mike. Next, we will have Charles.
Thank you. I agree a lot with what Mike said in that issue. I know every year we face this thing. Of course, the thing with gender identity as far as women's sports are concerned, it has just totally turned the women's sports completely upside down. And it's almost really done away with them as competition would be. But every year we are faced with the same question. I do not want to create another class of people that is going to just, you could possibly use this as a basis, whether justified or not. I would probably end up supporting this because mainly, no matter what we do, the world is changing around us. And if we refuse to change, we may be left in the dust. So I would probably support this now, but I think that we're going to have to take a position on things like the women's athletics and things like that, where we're going to destroy that what we've got for our young ladies in this state.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Eric.
Thank you, Anitra. You know, the very conservative U.S. Supreme Court has supported this position. West Virginia should not be left behind by not supporting this, by not adding this to our Human Rights Act. As I agree with Mr. Clements, who said that the world is changing around us. That is true. And for some, change is uncomfortable. But you know what? That's what makes us better. When we embrace freedom for all, we will become a better and more perfect union, as our U.S. As the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution encourage our government to do. The government should not be in the business of discrimination. and neither should we obviously have gone through that in the history of our country. And in order to move West Virginia forward, not backward, there shouldn't be a debate on this. We should do it today, move West Virginia forward, and allow those who have different backgrounds to not face discrimination in the workplace or in public accommodations. And one other thing I want to say is I officiate boys and girls high school basketball on the side, as well as volleyball. This isn't a problem. It's not a problem now. It has never been a problem. I know there's a story going around the internet from another state, not West Virginia. It's not a problem here in terms of destroying our sports or anything like that. I think the better thing to come from it is teaching our young people about equality and treating each other with respect and dignity. And I think that will make us a better state, both with individuals and moving forward into business and our economy and things of that nature if we do this. So thank you.
Thank you for your answer. We'll move on to question 4. There are no quick fixes to stopping the opioid epidemic in West Virginia. What more needs to be done to curtail this public health, economic, and social services crisis for our state? And for this question, we will start with Barbara.
Well, Anitra, I think that's a really hard question. And I'm not sure of the answer. We've tried many different things. Charlie and I have both served together for many years, and we've limited access to opioids, and it's like we're squeezing the balloon or squeezing Jello, and it pops up and it turns into fentanyl. And I don't think we are going to incarcerate our way out of this problem. The origin of the problem is not originally the people who became addicted. It's not their fault. We had people that had dental surgery. We have people that don't have jobs and are depressed. And I think a lot of what we can do is to work on improving our economy. And I personally think passing legislation that, like the last issue we were talking about, will bring big companies in here and will stop our young people from leaving because they think we're so backward. But I think it's a really complicated problem. I don't think the answer is limiting syringe exchange programs, that the legislature drastically cut back on that. And there are going to be people that are dying that could have been saved. And we're going to have some other epidemics besides opioid. So I think it's a really complicated problem. It's something we have been working on for a long time, and we're going to have to keep working on it and, get the best and brightest minds in our community. That's why we're so lucky to live in a community with a university. And so I think we just have to keep working. We're not there yet. And it's a very, very hard problem.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Mike.
This is a tremendous problem we have in West Virginia, and I've had friends who have lost children to this epidemic, and I've known adults who have struggled and really had a difficult time with this opioid problem. It's going to require a holistic solution, and we really need help from our federal partners. There's so much the federal government can be doing to support us, and they are failing in so many ways, particularly the DEA and others are not doing all that they can do to help us with this problem. It's an education issue where we need to better educate patients and parents and physicians. It's a healthcare issue where we need to be better able to deliver the healthcare that people need and support people suffering from this. It's an economic development issue. It's a law enforcement issue. And in reality, opioids a little bit like that light switch on the wall. It's not the light switch that turns on and off. it's that circle switch that is a dimmer. And it's very difficult for somebody to turn that dimmer all the way off and click. It's not like a light switch where somebody can be on opioids and flip the switch and go off. It's a dimmer, and that dimmer almost never goes all the way to off. And it requires tremendous counseling and services and support. And I'm committed to doing all that I can to try to fix this problem. I think it's one of our biggest challenges that we face in West Virginia. We need a holistic solution, and I'm prepared to go to work to fight for these young people in our state who need our support, and they need the support of our federal government as well.
Thank you for that answer. Next, we will have Charles.
You know, when we stop and talk about the drug problems we've got, when we realize that the drug business is one of the largest businesses in the world. I mean, it would compete with some of our major corporations as far as the amount of money that they have and that goes through their hands. And we do need a lot of help from the federal government. We need a lot of help trying to stop the drugs from coming into this country. You know, very few of these drugs really originate in West Virginia. They come into here, of course, from usually from South America and China, and they are distributed from places like Cleveland and Detroit that bring those drugs into West Virginia. And we have a lot of people trying to stop it, but I think Barbara said the thing, we can't build enough jails to hold all the people that we could probably need to arrest to put in there. But the biggest thing that I see is that we need two things. We need an economy with jobs, because if we have jobs, all these other problems are going to go away, because what's the old saying, idle hands are the devil's workshop. And when people don't have anything to do, they don't have something to look forward to, that's when they turn to things like drugs. Now, I know a lot of people got hooked on drugs before even the medical community began to realize what a problem that OxyContin and the drugs that they were giving people for pain were causing. And I think that was the thing that now we've educated our medical community. I think that's going to help an awful lot. But the good economy, and above all, a good family, which I think comes from a good economy, will help us defeat this drug problem. We need rehab. And I think we should put money into rehab for these people that do have the problem. And like Mike said, you can't just click the switch off.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Eric.
Thank you, Anitra. So I agree. I think Mike said this is one of the biggest issues facing West Virginia. And really, it's one of the major reasons I'm in this race. This past legislative session, nothing got done to help it. It's a problem. It needs to be addressed, and needs to be addressed today. As a lawyer, from time to time, in cases I deal with, we deal with what's called a root cause analysis, trying to figure out what the problem was, the root of the problem is. And it's a multifaceted problem. Obviously, it takes two to tango, as they say. You have drugs, and you have those who want to take them, or do take them for some reason. And there are a lot of reasons why folks take drugs and get addicted to them. There are obviously the reason that dealers bring them in and sell them is because people will take them. So there are we have to figure out the root of the problem. And we've got to tackle that and fix it. Then we're already in the problem, so we got to help those who need assistance. We need to have a lot more rehab beds in West Virginia. We don't have nearly enough. We've got to provide assistance to those who have been addicted, who have been able to kick the addiction and to re-enter, just like felons. We talked earlier about felons. They have to re-enter our economy, re-enter the society, to be able to stay away from addiction, not just to beat it, but to stay away from it. It's a problem. It's a disease that needs a cure. Obviously, we have to tackle those who are selling the drugs. We've got to arrest them. We've got to put them in jail. But there aren't enough. We're not going to just find our way out of this by just. It's a multifaceted major problem that we've got to find answers for, and that's one of the major reasons I'm running for the state senate.
Thank you for your answer, Eric. And we will have Carly to wrap this question up.
I think we can all agree that this is one of the biggest problems, which is great. I mean, I think the legislature for a long time, maybe not every single session, but they've been trying to find out, like Eric just said, the root cause. But I don't think there would be just one root cause. I mean, everyone has already touched on it. It could be family, it could be economic opportunities or lack of opportunities. I think Barbara mentioned dental procedures or operations that can get someone hooked on Oxycontin or whatever pain medication they were prescribed. And it's not just one root cause, it's a whole facet that we're going to have to battle in order to even scratch the surface as to how we can fix this problem and decrease the amount of people who are using these opioids. And I would like to push back a little bit on what Barbara mentioned about the syringe exchange. I have the opposite view. I don't think that the government should be enabling people who have serious addiction by giving them syringes or meth pipes. As we've seen, I believe there's a clinic in downtown Morgantown that gives people free meth pipes and filters and whatever they need to use their illicit drugs. I don't think enabling is going to help us get any closer to decreasing the amount of drug use that is in our state. And hopefully we can all work together from both sides of the aisle to help people, get them into rehab. And we all know people, or at least know people who knew people by a second degree who have been touched by this. And we all just need to work together and figure out where we need to begin.
Thank you, Carly, for your answer. We will now move on to question 5. The Center for Energy and Sustainable Development at WVU says that renewable energy is a cost-effective solution to diversity and strengthen West Virginia's economy. Will you support legislation to increase production of renewable energy? Please explain. And with this question, we will start with Mike.
Thank you. I wrote an editorial recently that appeared in some newspapers around West Virginia, where I was suggesting that we do need to have alternative sources of energy. I'm always been a all of the above person when it comes to energy production. So, and I have voted for legislation to create opportunities to use alternative energy. At the same time, we're blessed in West Virginia with fossil fuels, and some states are not. And West Virginia has a competitive advantage over those other states because of the fossil fuels that lie beneath our feet. And so to the extent that we can mine coal and use it in a responsible manner, to the extent that we can drill for natural gas and sell that in the open market across the country, potentially across the globe, with new technologies that exist, I think we need to do that. We can't turn our back on a tremendous resource that is available to us, but at the same time, we can use some of those renewable energies. Our base energy can be provided by the fossil fuels, and that's really important for our state and important for our nation. If the Monongalia County school system wants to purchase one or more of the school buses that are going to be built in South Charleston that will run on a different source of fuel, I say let's do that, particularly if the federal government will pay for it. But at the end of the day, I'm not ready to give up on our natural resources. I think they provide tremendous employment for our citizens. They provide economic dollars throughout our communities, and they help fund our state government services that are so vital. So I'm an all of the above guy when it comes to energy.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Charles.
Thank you. Yes, we have a lot of coal. Yes, we have a lot of natural gas in our state. Matter of fact, they say we probably in this nation have 200 years of natural gas at the current rate. I think for us to all of a sudden throw in the towel on these things and say, no, we can't use those is wrong. I don't think our electrical system is all totally up to moving to completely wind and solar energy. We're just not going to be able to do that. I did support and will support diversifying our energy base from strictly coal, because we have customers in society today that say, we would like to come to West Virginia, but we want solar energy or we want wind energy. And we have to be able to provide that for those people to come in. We did pass a law this year that will allow nuclear power plants to be built in the state. And I think there's a great future in the nuclear industry. If we look at what the Navy has done in their years of very safe success with nuclear power on all their ships and many of their vessels, I think we have to look at that. But we cannot turn our back on our natural gas and our coal, because we're going to need that to make this transition. It will take time, and we just can't do it overnight.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Eric.
Thank you, Anitra. I'm also an all of the above person, I suppose, on the energy. We in West Virginia should know very well that, particularly as it pertains to fossil fuels, an economy that's based on the production, the extraction and production of fossil fuels, that those industries have ebbs and flows. And there are times when the coal market is up and there are times when the coal market is down. And there's nothing that West Virginia can necessarily do about that. But what we can do is use what we have, but also prepare for the future. And we should have been doing it a long, long time ago. And this can get into a number of the other issues we talked about. But if we invest in renewable energies, if we invest in the infrastructure to build that here, to train our workers to build wind turbines, to build solar panels, to bring those factories in here, we create good paying jobs. We're in a global economy, and a lot of the rest of the world is using renewable energy resources. A lot of America is using them, and that's something they've decided to do on their own. And we should take part in that. We shouldn't be left screaming at the table that we want just coal and oil and gas from West Virginia. We should keep those jobs. We absolutely should. We should create more of those jobs if we can. But unfortunately, we're reliable in the market, and the market today is moving toward renewable energies, and that's what we should grab that with both hands and do what we can here in West Virginia to create the jobs and to create the energy from West Virginia. We have lots of wind turbines around. We've got high peaks and mountains where those are useful. We should do all that we can to make sure that West Virginia has a seat at the table, and that includes embracing renewable energy.
Thank you, Eric. Next, we will hear from Carly.
Thank you. I would have no issue with West Virginia sort of developing and trying to adapt using renewable energy. But like my other colleagues, I don't think that we need to turn away from fossil fuels or from coal, because, for example, wind energy, wind turbines, they will only generate usable power for so long. And then you also have to think of the batteries that's stored. What does that take to develop? What does that take to create? So I think that those are some additional questions that should be asked before our state decides to really invest a lot of money on a large scale. And the same with solar panels. We would have to see how much land would have to take to set up solar panels and how much power that would generate, how much power could it store, would it be able to handle winters? I mean, it's a lot of extra questions that would need to be addressed before any big investment would occur. But I would have no issue with us trying to diversify what our energy source is. And I'm glad that Charles brought up the nuclear energy possibility, because nuclear energy is very clean and it is very safe. And I think that before we would go dependent on renewable energy, I think that nuclear would be a great option as well, so that we are not dependent on just one source of energy, not just coal, not just fossil fuels, not just wind energy. And as we see with going on with gas prices and how the world market can fluctuate, I think diversifying our energy would be a good idea, as long as we address the important questions before we spend hundreds of millions of dollars of tax dollars on something that may not be sustainable.
Thank you for your answer. And we will wrap that question up with Barbara.
Thank you. I want to back up and maybe make a little bit better response to the last question. I think the reason we have an opioid epidemic is because we had some corporations that were purely evil, that intentionally misled the public and intentionally misled physicians to say that this was a safe painkiller. And I think that the syringe exchange is something that is scientifically based, supported by the CDC, both the current CDC and also during the Trump administration. And the reason it's important is we do not want people to be using dirty needles and then spreading epidemics of either hepatitis or HIV. Vice President Pence, in his state, they had a very, very serious HIV because they were so worried about not enabling people. I think that we need to think about public health. I think that should be number one. With respect to renewable energy, I totally agree that we should be supportive of that. Nobody mentioned the two words climate change, but that's another reason. But I also think our over-reliance on fossil fuels has been very harmful in West Virginia. We are at the bottom of the pack because we are so dependent on the boom and bust economy. It is only in our best interest to diversify. And so I think everybody agrees that we need to diversify, I think we should have done it a long time ago. One area that I think we could really, it's almost low-hanging fruit, is energy efficiency. Right now, our electric companies really discourage that because they make less money if we use less energy. So I think that's something that small businesses and homes, if we had ways to improve our energy usage, it would be good for our renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. We'll move on to question number 6. Transgender and gender non-conforming youth face challenges at school. A recent survey found that these children feel unsafe, have lower GPAs, are more likely to miss school, and are less likely to continue their education. What can the legislature do to help assure a safe and positive learning experience for these children? And we will begin this question with Charles.
That's a difficult question. I think the best thing we can do is create an atmosphere within our schools of acceptance of these people. And, children they're tough. They don't hold back. And if they feel like that somebody is different than they are, sometimes they will, I don't want to say attack them, but they will not treat them the same as they do other people. And I think it's a matter of educating our young people and educating our people within the school system and things to be on the lookout for problems and try to catch them before they get out of hand. It's a very difficult situation that these people may be involved in. maybe the choice or not a choice of their own, but it's still a very difficult thing. And I think the best thing we can do is to begin to teach our children at a young age to be acceptable of all people, regardless of race, color, gender, or whatever reason, that is something that begins also at home with the parents teaching these children to be respectful of others, regardless of their thoughts and their choices.
Thank you for that answer. Next, we will have Eric.
Thank you, Anitra. As an elected official, as a representative, as a member of the legislature, not all that we do is about legislation. It's about being a role model. It's about going out, talking to people, the people you represent, the people you meet. You have a voice to create, and I agree with Mr. Clements, to create an atmosphere, an environment, a society that is accepting. Children listen to what adults say. They listen, they hear politicians speaking, they hear their parents speaking, they hear their teachers, they hear just adults in general. And when as legislators, at least I hope to be legislator, has a deep responsibility to ensure that the things that you're saying are inclusive, that we encourage an inclusive society. But certainly there are things that the legislature can do from a legislative standpoint as well. We do need to make a focus on anti-bullying. It's transgender, it's gender non-conforming, it's LGBTQ, all those things that we need to make sure that our children are educated in a way that fairness and inclusion is a part of the curriculum. It doesn't mean we're indoctrinating students. It doesn't mean they can believe what they want to believe, but at least to treat people with respect and fairness and not bully because they're different than each other. So it's both legislative, but it's also just as a person with the position, the responsibility to be out there and speaking, and when you're speaking, to make sure that you're telling folks, or at least enduring that folks are inclusive and respectful to others.
Thank you for your response. We will next have Carly.
Thank you. For transgender and gender nonconforming children, since we are talking about children, that subject should not be in the classroom at all. For example, teachers should not be discussing that with the young children in public school or private school. It's not something that children should be exposed to, and we've seen I believe the ballpark figures 20% increase in transgender youth in just the past decade, I believe. And it's basically turned into sort of a social contagion. We've seen, and I've read studies where one adolescent girl would identify as transgender, and then all of her friends would also follow suit. And before that, it usually was adolescent boys who would identify as transgender, and now it is completely flipped to adolescent girls. So I think that's something that we need to guard our children from, and instead of as we need to guide our children, we also need to tell them that boys are boys and girls are girls. And I think that's something that us as legislators, and as Eric said, and I'm sure we disagree on our different opinions, is we do need to be role models, and we do need to guide our kids on what is true. And that's something that we all need to do.
Thank you for your answer, Carly. Next, we will have Barbara.
Thank you, Anitra. I think I might flip the question. And I think the legislature in the past few years has done many things that would make transgender kids, and people in the transgender and the LGBTQ community feel uncomfortable, and worse of all, are pushing children to suicide because they feel different. So when we get upset because some cities have conversion bans like Morgantown and Charleston and other cities, when we want to say that we're going to legislate so that cities don't have the authority to make those decisions, that doesn't make people who are different feel comfortable. I think people that are, we're losing talent. People who feel like they are not wanted and that nobody could talk about them in school or anywhere else are going to leave. And we are having people leaving in droves. And I have family members who have left the state because they do not feel welcome in West Virginia. We should be a welcoming state. And so I think that a lot of the legislation that has been pushed, that are these hot button issues that people think are motivating somebody and they're making everybody angry, I don't think that's been good for our state. And I really don't think it's been good for the children who feel different. And I feel so worried about those kids and their parents who just want to have a child that can thrive and flourish. And we are not, the atmosphere in this state right now is not welcoming.
Thank you for your answer. And we will wrap that question up with Mike.
Thank you. Sometimes we get the question and the answer flipped around a little bit, and this is kind of one of those as I look at it. What can the legislature do? And that's oftentimes the question that's asked with many issues involving public education. And oftentimes the answer is not what can the legislature do, but what can the legislature simply get out of the way of? And, we have 55 boards of education. We have school principals. We have quality teachers certified. Some of them even go to advanced levels of study and become nationally certified. Oftentimes, the best thing the legislature can do for public education is get out of the way. And so I'm not sure that the legislature should involve itself in something like this. I'd be willing to look at the quote recent survey that was referenced. Be happy to look at that. But I really think we need to give these boards of education that are elected by the citizens in the respective counties that understand the values in those counties and give these principals and school teachers an opportunity to do their jobs. Barbara and I just coincidentally were both at a fundraiser tonight for a Board of Education candidate. And Barbara and I differ on many issues. She said earlier that she felt like West Virginia was at the bottom of the pack. I don't feel that way, but we can come together around our public school systems and encourage those board members, those principals, those teachers, the staff to educate our kids and teach them a culture of fairness, that so whatever type of student comes into that classroom, they all can be treated fairly and they all can be given an opportunity to achieve success in West Virginia.
Thank you for your answer. And we will move on to question number 7. West Virginia Department of Health and Human Resources has shared that there are not enough social workers or foster care families to care for our foster children. What must be done to shore up our foster care system? And we will start that question with Eric.
Thank you again, Anitra. So this is another major problem that's facing West Virginia and largely comes out of the opioid epidemic. It's a tangential but directly related problem as well. In our legislature, again, unfortunately, with the leadership failed to get anything done on this again. So What I would say is that first we need to give DHHR the resources that they need to attract social workers, attract families that are able to care, to be foster parents, and the resources to be able to ensure that the foster system in West Virginia, which is at its breaking point, quite literally, is a system where we can take care of our children that no longer have parents, or have parents who are addicted to opioids or have other issues. Recently, I saw in Wetzel County, and this may be a year or so or two old, but 40% of the children in the school system are being raised by a grandparent. That's awful, and it's a byproduct of an economy that is not working. It's a byproduct of an opioid epidemic that is running rampant without a solution or solutions. And those are the issues that, quite frankly, again, the legislature didn't do anything this past session on either of those two issues, did nothing. And that's just unsustainable. We have to tackle these issues. We have to provide the resources. We have to hear from experts and understand the problems and develop legislation and programs that will fix these issues. And that's what I'm going to do in the legislature.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Carly.
Thank you. I agree with what Eric just said, because we know that the social worker, especially the pay, is incredibly low for the hard work and difficult work that they have to do in regards to the foster care system, where there's removals or trying to get an adoption together. And there's just a lot of moving pieces. And my understanding from speaking to a couple social workers and foster parents as well is that there's so much red tape when a family just wants to foster, or they want to foster to adopt. There is a lot of red tape whenever they're trying to adopt a child where maybe the parent hasn't been around, or they did sign over their rights, and it's really difficult on both the foster family and the social worker. And social workers have an incredible caseload. It's impossible for people to keep up, and there does need to be some incentives to attract people to that job, knowing that it's a difficult job. But right now, with just the pay that social workers get, it's very difficult to attract and also keep people in that role. And it has to be someone who's also not a faint of heart, because it is such a thankless job most of the time, from people who I have talked to. And I think that's something that legislators need to approach with a multifaceted approach as well. And like Eric said, again, a lot of it is tied to our opioid problem. So if we can begin to decrease the opioid problem, then that would also decrease the issues that we have with our foster care system and our social work system. But I think we need to start with getting them more resources, and then that's where we need to start.
Thank you for your answer. Next, we will have Barbara.
Thank you, Anitra. Well, I do want to stick up a little bit for the legislature and for my colleague, Senator Clements. We did try to give a very large raise to social workers this past session, and the governor vetoed it. And he's now saying that he's going to find money in the budget. Well, I'm not sure. I will believe that when I see it, but it is critical. I personally think we've had this problem for as long as I've been in the legislature, which is over 2 decades. And we have had high vacancy rate. It is far worse now because of the opioid crisis. And I think it has a lot to do with undervaluing the female-dominated profession of social work. I think social work is a very noble profession. And most of the people who do that are females, and they care. And the pay, we don't value that as a society, and we should, because that's part of what we do as a state, is take care of our children. And so I think a 15% raise, which is what we were hoping to do, and I hope we eventually do, is probably not even enough. This ought to be one of our #1 priorities, and we should value social workers like we value people that have a 4-year engineering degree. We have engineers, we have social workers, they're both important, and we just do not pay them enough. I mean, I always think about the social worker that's seen a child, there are cigarette burns, and they don't know if they're accidental or on purpose, and they go home and they try to make dinner for their kids. That is a very stressful situation. And I've talked to people that saw babies in cribs with maggots. This is a very hard job. The working conditions are hard, and we need to pay people what they're worth.
Thank you for your answer. And next we will have Mike.
Foster care was always the problem in West Virginia, finding enough families to take care of the children that were in need. The opioid crisis has magnified this problem beyond anything I think most people can imagine. I've talked to the professionals in DHHR that work in this field. Just Sunday, I had lunch with a family who was doing fostering, and I'm learning as much as I can about this issue because I'm really starting to come to the conclusion that this may be the most important thing we need to focus on in state government. What's happening to our children that have no one that loves them? They don't have a parent, the grandparent can't be there, maybe is too old, maybe is gone. And there are just these children that are out there that are in desperate need of support. And we want to provide them a loving home, a safe home. We want to provide them nutrition, an opportunity for an education. We want to provide them a sense of belonging. And we have to do that through government services, but also with the help of many churches and other charitable organizations. And so we need to bring these resources together. Again, a holistic way of doing that. Families that I've talked to that have attempted to be foster families have said that they were almost made to feel like they were the villain with all the requirements and everything that was put on them, where they really just wanted to help. And so we have to streamline the process, identify people that can make a difference in children's lives and support them, because these children, they're the future of West Virginia. And if we're putting them in harm's way or not giving them the tools to be successful, West Virginians will suffer for that long term, as will those children.
Thank you for that answer. And we will wrap that question up with Charles.
Thank you very much. Barbara alluded to the fact that we did pass legislation to give them a raise and the governor vetoed it. That's the bad news. The good news is that, and if you want to call it good news, there are hundreds of vacancies within the DHHR, and the governor has said basically they have the authority then to shrink those jobs that are not filled and probably won't be filled, and take those monies and give raises to the CPS workers and the social workers to get them up to a higher level and make it more attractive. That is a very difficult job. My granddaughter worked at that for a while, and it was very difficult on her. She was young, and she came very distressed about it, and I'm sure what it is. But I think that we get back down to the root problem that I keep wanting to allude to, and that if we bring jobs to our state, a lot of these problems will go away. And I talked to someone who showed me an example of two schools in the same county. One of them had high achievement, and the other one, the achievement was not very good. And the only difference between those two schools really was not the teachers, not the students, but the fact that the students in the better school had two parents, and they weren't being raised in a single parent. They weren't being raised by grandparents, which I think is a tragedy when the grandparents and even some cases great-grandparents are having to raise these children. And I also think that we have thrown up so many barriers to people who maybe want to adopt children, who want to become foster parents, but yet there are so many regulations and so many hoops you have to run through and jump through that they decide it's just not worth it. And so they don't do it.
Thank you for your answer. So now we will leave space if there were any additional questions.
I'm actually not seeing any question. I guess you all have answered the questions very well this evening.
Awesome.
Yeah, none in the Facebook chat.
Awesome. So now we will move into our closing statements. So each candidate will have 2 minutes to provide their closing statements, and you will get the warning signals as before. And we will begin with Charles and close out with Mike as we did before. Charles, you can begin with your closing statement.
Thank you very much. I have been pleased and honored to serve as a senator from the 2nd District now for 6 years. I was appointed in 2017 to fill the seat vacated when Kent Leonhardt became the Secretary of Agriculture and was elected to the position in 2018. At the time, the 2nd District consisted of 9 counties. So I know what it's like to be on the road, all rural counties, and I have represented rural Mon County, but I do work with Mon County very well in issues concerning roads and highways and trying to get things done for economic development in Monongalia County. But what I do want to say is that my objective is to try to work on workforces, to get our workforce up. We need our schools to be ready, because when people look at coming to West Virginia, what do they look at? They look for schools, they look for healthcare, they look for recreational activities. And we have a lot of that to offer here in West Virginia. And it's competitive anymore to get people to come here, to get jobs and people moving in. The tourist industry is becoming very large in this state, and we need to be ready. We cannot return to the old ways of the past in West Virginia. We need to continue to develop these things. West Virginia is becoming a very big tourist destination, and we hope soon will become a destination for jobs and people. And I want to continue to work toward these goals to bring West Virginia into the forefront and into this century.
Thank you so much for your closing statement, Charles. Next, we will have the closing statement from Eric.
Thank you, Anitra. Thank you again to League of Women Voters and NAACP and the Community Coalition for Social Justice for hosting this tonight. I think we've heard a lot here this evening. And as I've said tonight, my campaign is about moving West Virginia forward. It's about finding real solutions to the real problems that West Virginia faces. We've talked about a number of those tonight. The opioid epidemic, education, jobs, those are real issues that West Virginia faces. We are too often on the top of the wrong lists and at the bottom of the right lists. We have in the last half century not gained population, we've lost population. We're the only state to do so, lost population. It's because we haven't created the jobs and the economic opportunity that we need to do so to keep West Virginians here. We're losing generations and have lost generations of West Virginians to other states, other jobs, other high-paying jobs. I'm frankly tired of seeing that. As a young, relatively young West Virginian, 38 years old, many of my friends have left this state for other opportunities. I'd like to bring them back. We do that by making public education a priority. Valuing public education. We do that by finding a solution or solutions to the opioid problem. We do that by building infrastructure, not just roads and highways, but broadband, put broadband in every corner of West Virginia. And the broadband that is in West Virginia, make it reliable. My parents' broadband in West Virginia is off more than it's on. We need to fix those problems. That's how we grow West Virginia. And I submit to you, the legislature hasn't done that very well. And that's why I'm running. And that's why I want to be the senator for the 2nd district.
Thank you so much for your closing statement. Now we will have closing statements from District 13. We will hear from now Carly.
Thank you. And thank you again for having us all here tonight. My husband and I, we live here in Westover, and we lived here in Morgantown for going on 12 years now. And I'm born and raised in West Virginia. I'm from Brooke County, and I've been in Mon County for, like I said, almost 12 years. And we have one toddler, and we hope that we can grow our family, and we hope that they will be able to stay here by the time they're grown. And some things that we've all agreed on is we need more jobs and just more opportunity, not just in this area, because Mon County has been growing exponentially, and we need to expand that outside of District 13, outside of District 2, but in West Virginia as a whole. And that's really important. And as far as broadband, we all know that this is a big problem. I drive on the University Town Center, and I hit at least 3 dead zones. And I know exactly whenever my service is going to drop off. And there are several places in town. You would think you're right in the middle of town and you should have cell service and broadband, but that's not the case. And I think that's something that we all need to work on, because if we don't have good broadband and good cell service, then we're not going to get big companies, big corporations, and bringing their jobs and their opportunity. And I'm running because I want to be the conservative voice for District 13. And I thank you all again for having me.
Thank you so much for your closing statements. Now we will have closing statements for District 13 from Barbara.
Thank you. I'm running for several different reasons. One of the reasons I want to run is I want to use my experience and my legal training to be the first female elected to the Senate from Mon or Marion County. We've never had a female before, and we have a very small number of women in our state legislature, both in the House and the Senate. And I think women augment and provide a very important perspective. And it's difficult for women in the legislature. For example, we keep bringing up fair pay as if, and some people seem to act like that problem has been solved. Well, it hasn't. And the social workers is a pretty good example of it. I agree with Charlie, our senator from Wetzel County, that tourism is a really exciting thing, that we have an absolutely gorgeous state, and we are now taking more advantage of enhancing the tourism experience. But I think we have been going in a very negative direction that has, I think, made people vote with their feet and leave. We are punishing unions, we're punishing women, we're punishing our public school system. We are really dismantling it in a number of ways. And I don't think most people understand how much harm is being done by some of these so-called reforms. We were formed in our country with free schools as being in our Constitution. And pretty soon we are going to diminish the value of that because of all these so-called reforms that in many ways will just be a ripoff and won't be educating the students that we need for the future. So I want to go in a different direction than the current leadership. And I think I have the experience and the talents to do that.
Thank you for your closing statement. And we will wrap up the closing statement from District 13 with Mike.
Thank you, Anitra, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the NAACP, all of you that have worked to put on this event tonight. I've been called a lot of things in my life based on the title. I've been called president when I was student body president at West Virginia University. I've been called a delegate. I've been called a senator. a lieutenant, a captain, a husband, a father. But one of the titles that I cherish the most is being called and introducing myself as a West Virginian. I'm proud of West Virginia, and I want to continue to make our state an even better place to live and work and raise a family. And as I said when I started tonight, my focus will be on delivering quality state government services. And that's everything from highways to education to healthcare, protecting our environment, all those kinds of things that our government does and we can help do better as a legislature. But I also want to focus on the things that are important to us at the local level. Today, I talked with David McCormick, who is the county highway supervisor for Monongalia County. And I told him about some very large potholes on Burroughs Street. And I asked him to give those potholes his attention as quickly as possible. I talked today to the Secretary of Transportation, Jimmy Riston, and I asked him, can we get this intersection built onto I-79 at Harmony Grove, which will protect the citizens of Westover from enormous truck traffic that will come their way if we don't get this completed. I asked him about the intersection at Star City, the federal interstate exit. What can we do? How can we make sure Star City and Granville have an opportunity to grow? And I've talked to our law enforcement about crimes that are occurring in places like South Park, where criminals feel so comfortable they walk up onto people's porches and steal things. So my focus will be on these local important issues that touch our citizens every day, with an eye to the state as a whole and how we can be most successful in serving the people of West Virginia. Thank you again for giving us this opportunity tonight.
Thank you for your closing statements. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating. There were some great answers tonight to all of the questions. And I do want to encourage those of you that are elected, that when you are committed to the office, that if you can work together and reach across the aisle, you will make West Virginia a priority. And then we can all begin to see the outcomes of our state begin to change. I thank you. And as president of the Morgantown-Kingwood branch of NAACP, we are a bipartisan. We do not, we're not affiliated with any political party. I am committed to change. So you will definitely be hearing from me in Monongalia County. And I just thank you guys for taking time to voice your concerns and answering the questions. We also want to encourage everyone to don't forget to vote. You can find more information on voting at vote411.org. You can also find tonight's recording on the YouTube page at lwvmorgantown.org/YouTube. Again, we thank all of you for participating. We wish you well with your platforms. Don't forget to register to vote, election day, and also early voting. Again, thank you for participating, and we wish you all well with your platforms. And you all have a lovely evening. And again, be blessed in your platform. Good night.